2 seconds there now. Okay. Thanks a million for everybody for joining for today's session on dyslexia overview and support. So to give you a very, very brief background, and then we'll start going through straight into our content. I'm Una Buckley. I'm the founder of Blossom for Life, and we've worked with many organisations to date, both here in Ireland and abroad in the UK. I'll keep the slides like this if that's okay at the moment, guys, just so I can see people jumping in and out of the session. So hopefully that's all that suits you. If anybody liked the slides afterwards, feel free to send me an email also. Just some supports of what we're looking at. So again, from following on from today, obviously we can't cover everything in this session. So if anybody needs some additional support or things they'd like further detail in, do some initial screenings, some consultations. So we do a lot of work with teachers as well directly in the school, and some organisations. But primarily we operate on a one-to-one basis, providing kind of a tuition-based support for students in both primary, secondary and third level education. So on some of the topics that we look at today of homework, well-being, technology, any kind of difficulties that are presented throughout the school day for a student would generally warrant maybe a further extra piece of support outside of school, and hopefully that's where we'd come in a little bit. We also do then a lot on transitioning both between schools, but then also transitioning particularly from primary to secondary as well. Obviously our details, hopefully you all have our website and email address at this stage. Again, if anybody has any questions after today's session, feel free to get on to me directly. So we'll kick in just a very brief overview of learning difficulties, and primarily today we'll look at kind of dyslexia, dysgraphia, dyscalculia. Unfortunately, we can't look at them at all in a huge level of detail, as we'll be here for quite a long piece of time, but just giving everybody a brief overview. So some difficulties that might be presented for someone with dyslexia might be learning the alphabet initially, phone numbers or number reversal, days and months, even telling the time, both analog and digital, can be quite challenging. Then in our box to the right, so auditory processing, phonological awareness, working memory, processing speed, and executive functioning, all might be, let's say, words that people might be familiar with if they've partaken or had a child partake before in a previous educational psychologist assessment. And these are all indicators that are scored on various levels as to then maybe indicating further warrant for a further report or assessment, or indicating a learning difficulty such as dyslexia. The main benefit, though, of, I suppose, the learning approach really to dyslexia is using a multisensory learning approach. And down in our left-hand side box, our look, say, here, right, or combination of our sensory approaches is proven to be the most effective way for someone with dyslexia. Unfortunately, what that doesn't take into, though, is the time factor to do that. So for a student to write, to hear, to listen to it back, to record it, to do all these multiple strands for one piece of information isn't always very time conducive, particularly if they're, doing their leaving cert or in, let's say, further third level exams. So we want to look at an approach that specifically works for a student, that's catered to them and their needs and their mindset. Now, not to harp on about it, but as we know, there's many famous people throughout the world that have dyslexia or other learning differences. So it really is about promoting that advocacy for a student or a child that you may have at home or even in the classroom, so that they understand an aspect of their learning, so that yes, there is an aspect that's slightly different, but also it comes with a great deal of strengths. But unfortunately, still at the education system level, it's still centered towards a learning off and a memory retention approach. So that's really where working on confidence, well-being and self-esteem strategies are paramount to students in a learning environment, because over time it can become a little bit more challenging and things can get a little bit trickier, let's say, to move through with a bit more ease. Now, to briefly look at dyspraxia. So dyspraxia is from a fine and a gross motor aspect. Now, it's important here to note that a student can also have dyslexia and dysgraphia. They can have dyspraxia, dyslexia, dysgraphia. They can have a range of multiple overlaps. And that's nothing abnormal or uncommon. It would just mean that there's different skill sets and different supports that need to be put in place for a student with multiple layers. This may affect their handwriting. So particularly maybe for students in secondary school context where they're writing more paragraphs and essays, the first piece of their work may be a lot neater, and as they move through it may be a lot more scattered or a lot more challenging to understand. Their gross motor skills, so they may, hit into lockers, trip over things and fall down a step, not recognize things and kind of, bang into things a little bit, or they may still have perfect gross motor skills, catching a ball, tying shoelaces, swimming. And they may just struggle mildly, or they may struggle, on a more difficult level, depending upon the task that they're faced with. They may have difficulties here socially, so eye contact, interactions. Sense of direction is quite a common one as well, lefts and rights, and also sense of direction, even in a school or in a classroom. So if a teacher gives them direction, go to this other room and get this out of the cupboard and bring it back, that might be difficult as well. Now, it's important to note as we're doing this particular box, but as we move through today's session, that we often don't do what I call a self-diagnosis or a diagnosis of other people. These are quite common things. So somebody may struggle with sense of direction, but may not have dyspraxia, or they may struggle with telling time and they may not, let's say, be dyslexia. So I'd often find that people often either blame, diagnose themselves, or they diagnose somebody else, usually within a family or a social circle. And, it is important to, warrant a further detailed level of overview, because it's about the multitude and the combination of these difficulties, not just one solid aspect, let's say, in tandem or in its own box. Thought processing here, concentration, and then speech and language, or maybe delays there initially with pronunciation. Then dysgraphia. So I suppose dysgraphia is something that is becoming more prominent in an education system, and thankfully people are coming a little bit more aware of dysgraphia. I also have dysgraphia. So dysgraphia is when our brains think faster than my hand physically can write. That's the simplest way I can always present it to anybody else, because that's the way I understand it in my head. So initially this might be harder to spot in younger students, because it might be based upon their workload in a primary school level. Lots of students may have impeccable or really, really neat handwriting, and then this may become a little bit more challenging as they move into secondary school. They write more things down from the board, write more in their answers, write more in their essays. So again, the start few lines might be really easy to understand, and then as they move through the passage, it may turn into a completely different language. And again, this might be worked on with a range of fine and gross motor skills and activities. And a student may be very determined to improve or work on their handwriting, and that's great. However, then most students might opt for the typing approach, along with the approval, obviously, from a school context and exam board context. But a typing approach then may help resolve some of these issues as well that may overlap. And again, somebody with dysgraphia may also have dyslexia and dyspraxia too. So looking at some kind of practical things to look at as we move away from the kind of definitions and the overview. So the way I look at it from classroom and home-based strategies is that there's an overview here of what can apply both at home and in school. And what we want to do is we want to make things as simple as possible for everybody involved, both from a parent, from a teacher, and from a student level, and in that core kind of unit. Some things will work for some students and they'll use, indefinitely. Other things they might use for a little bit, they won't use anymore, they might come back to again. It is really important to note that everything is really individualistic. It really depends upon where the student's at, their openness and readiness, obviously, to adopting new methods, and also then in the cooperation of the school environment as well. There's a wide range of dyslexia font, so it's important to note that that might be useful for some students. It can be downloaded as well onto a computer. Some students might benefit from dyslexia font if they're reading a lot of passages or essays or have books online, etc. And then some mightn't use it as much. They may be more paper-based and, still in a handwriting zone. Ideally, we do want to limit as much white backgrounds on paper. So, for instance, as we're constantly writing in notebooks and copybooks, most of them are always predominantly white, hopefully with ruled lines, but most of them are white. So, opting for, yellow, green, pinks, lots of wide variety of notebooks, both in an A4 and in an A5, I think, or an A3 format, are readily available now anymore in stationery shops. And they can be very useful. They break up the monotony also of looking at a white page, but they can also be proven to help with memory and concentration. Color overlays or color lenses or tinted lenses. There's loads of different terms around this area. Again, there's kind of more of a definitive test, let's say an assessment, if somebody wants to look down that route. However, color overlays can be easily purchased on a number of different websites, and it's basically like a plastic color sheet that can be put over if there's loads of white pages that slightly changes the gradient of a page. So if a student is finding they're skipping lines quite often, if they're having difficulty with looking at the body of work all the time, or they're reading out of the book, these might help, and they can kind of change in around the colors. You can get slight pink tints, yellow, green, blue, and there also is a line tracker, so it will help with students that maybe skip over lines or skip through lines. Headings, subheadings, and bullet points, or kind of that format structure. So I suppose this is important to work at a basic, level initially for all ages of students. So for instance, for students that are in primary school in fifth and sixth class, as they're working towards maybe secondary school, that formatting and that structure of an answer is really great. We often have students that, are in TY and still don't know how to lay out a paragraph, or still don't know how to fully answer a question properly. And that's really important, that if we can embed those core concepts at a younger age, it kind of prevents that further difficulty as well as moving forward. From a teacher base, hopefully not that much from a home base, but thankfully with a positive aspect of COVID, there has been a limited corrections through RedPen. Lots of corrections were done online, and lots of corrections then were done in different formats at that time. But red for all of us signals something's wrong, something's incorrect. So if you can imagine red and traffic lights, it's a stop, it's a halt, it's a similar version to a student. And if they see one or multiple things crossed out and this X'd out and, this moved around in arrows, if there's lots of red on a page, which I would have received many times when I was small, it can become very defeated. It can become, quite harsh to understand. So even changing a colour of a pen has been proven to be a little bit easier to understand and to process. But ideally having corrections or having feedback as well directly with the student, so they understand what might need to be changed moving forward. And again, if you're doing corrections at home for homework, maybe a similar approach, and obviously having it hopefully more conversational based than it being done in a pen version. One instruction at a time. This is both applicable for both settings, both for school and for home. So, asking a child at home to go off and get the school bag and get their runners and then put them in the car and do this and do that. They may do one of them, they may do none of them, they may make up their own set of things that they need to do. So generally a one instruction at a time approach is very useful. Now, there are lots of tools that can be worked on to enhance that tolerance level. So for example, we can start with one instruction at a time, and with a number of strategies of us working directly with a student or somebody else, they can develop a skill set of elaborating on that. So then they're remembering obviously more and more information. But initially, one instruction at a time helps prevent the inaccuracies and helps hopefully limit conflict. Speaking slowly, not loudly, visual cues, movement breaks, and ongoing feedback. Hopefully most of those are fairly self-explanatory. The main ones here really are the movement breaks. So movement breaks both at home as well, if somebody's sitting for a long period of time studying or doing homework, but very much so in school. So having your small break and a big break is great, but movement throughout activities is very, very important, and it's been proven through decades of research to help with memory and concentration, and is beneficial for all students. Shouldn't just be for students with learning challenges or difficulties. It should be integrated very regularly for students. If possible as well, the activity can be done through movement. So if a student can do their homework orally or do it through a dictaphone, and they can be, standing or, balancing on one leg, or doing a range of activities and movement while partaking and doing something, hopefully that has more of a beneficiary impact. So to move on to do a little bit on the assistive technology slant. So assistive technology, as you know, obviously is becoming very, very important, very useful for most students with learning difficulties. There is a huge range of assistive technology, predominantly still based in an English, let's say, and in a reading and in a text-based format. For a number-based, it is still a little bit more challenging to figure out most suitable packages for students, but there's a wide range of options. My main recommendations here would be to try a lots of different software, either through some access through the library, either getting onto some of the companies themselves and seeing what might suit the student, both short term and a longer term approach. So some students may use particular packages in primary or in later primary, and then may use something totally different in post primary and also totally different in college and as things evolve and develop. So it really is seeing the lifespan of the technology, how useful that is, and more importantly, how quick they're going to be able to use the piece of technology. Are they going to use it every day? Is it once a week? Is it once a month? Or is it just going to be something that's sitting there? We want that adoption so that the student is using it on a regular basis and not something that's becoming obsolete. Read and Write is kind of one of the pre-existing pieces of assistive technology that's installed onto a laptop and can be really great to read out passages if homework is online or if there's lots of paragraphs or things that need to be read out loud. So Read and Write can be great for that. LiveScribe is more of a version that will help with note taking. So with the permission of the person that you're recording, either in a college environment or even a workplace environment, but also even in a school environment, if the teachers have approved on that, it's very, very useful. It can be then plugged into the laptop and notes can be transcribed, etc. And it also blends in, so it looks also quite like a pen. So it is very discreet. Dragon is a fabulous piece of software. It's a text to speech software. So it would be converting speech to text and text to speech. It converts, what the person's saying into a word text format, and really, really highly accurate in that basis. There isn't a lot of accuracy still in this field at the moment. So if a student wants to say, new paragraph, full stop, there may be changes there. And the difficulty with that obviously is for a student that they need to have confidence in the package that they're using, that it's going to produce the correct answer instead of giving them more work to make corrections and editing. So having something that's really accurate is very important. Natural reader, brain, photomath, hopefully all of those you can have a look into if there's something applicable there. But Luminosity is just a fabulous brain training package program. There's a free and a paid version, and so it doesn't really matter, as to which one you use. I'd recommend this for everybody, not just for students with learning difficulties, and for all age ranges. It's not majorly applicable to students maybe in the lower half of primary, but by the time they get to maybe 10 and above, it has a fabulous range of skill sets. And it's looking at memory, retention, coordination, and so many fundamental aspects that are not only educational based, but just life skill based. And it sends you two or three really, really short, they're kind of less than 60 seconds, kind of puzzles, games, depending upon what way you want to call them. But we would have had students for years and they often still text every now and again saying how wonderful they find some of the programs. So it is a great one for people to be staying on top of their cognitive functioning and skills. So some practical bases around spelling and reading and writing. So spelling skills and spelling strategies is obviously a very regular one for most students. Some may struggle more with spellings and some may find that their spelling is relatively okay. They just need a little bit of improvement. These are kind of the wide range of practical approaches that we find quite useful. And again, there's kind of methods to implementing some of these. It's very important to either link in with a teacher or a trained practitioner in this space so that they're kind of integrated with the student. And again, it's very much specific to what would suit them. So not all of these approaches will work for a student. However, there may be one or two that will stick really well. Obviously the bubble approach, and number two, we're coordinating the colours. The number three approach with rainbow we often don't use as much, particularly for younger students, as it might take half the day for them to write out the word in different colours. But stairs approach number four and number five are probably the most beneficial. So stage approach, descending and ascending, can be great for longer words. And number five, writing with your wrong hand, is a recent piece of research carried out in one of the well-known institutions. I think it was in Harvard University, that looked at this and writing with your wrong hand, and it can be a fascinating thing as to how we embed information differently if we write with our left versus our right, or write with our right versus our left, depending upon which is your dominant hand. Writing alphabetical order, dictionary work, to be honest, is a little bit debatable. Obviously, that's not maybe needed as much with Alexas and all the different ranges of technology anymore. Particularly dictionary work, obviously finding the letters in order can be a challenge, but maybe researching a word or getting a student to find the spelling of the word either online helps with that kind of developmental skills and discovering the word instead of it being given to them. Strategies for handwriting. So again, for younger students and for kind of secondary school or third level students, their handwriting may develop and may change. Their speed may develop and change, or it may decrease as well. So it's really important to be, I suppose, from a teacher base and a classroom base, to be kind of observing that level as to how much they're writing within the time frame, and as well then at home, maybe having a monitoring approach of that as well where possible. Planning out answers, mind mapping. It's important to note that there's specific mind mapping techniques for people with learning differences. A general mind mapping approach isn't conducive to someone with a learning difference, is actually creating more chaos because there's just a circle and words scattered around a page. So if somebody's interested in a specific mind map technique, feel free to get on to me directly and I can go through that. There's a range then, well, there's a wide range of what I call stationary items. And again, these are specific to particular students depending upon how they're holding a pen and a pencil. Lots of students that we would find of all age groups, 40s and 50s and 60s also included, may hold a pen and pencil incorrectly, and that might be due to a number of reasons and just habit over time. So it really is about maybe going back to basics at times and relearning a pattern to hold a pen and a pencil if a student really wants to, redevelop their handwriting skills. Using visual storyboards and drafts attempts can be very important. And then, as I said, typing then where possible, and using a range of typing-based programs and software can help students both in primary and in secondary school leading up to those bigger state exams to increase their typing speed and typing on a regular based approach. So just some kind of takeaway bits. Hopefully, from a content basis, we would look into this an awful lot more in our How to Help Dyslexic course page. So on our website, we have a range of course options around things to do at home practically, things to do in school, or if you're coming at it from a home base as a parent and you want to share things with a teacher in school, that can also be facilitated. Things to help around homework, and very much so as well around health and well-being, and they're all in that course program and that's available on the website. Just to look at, I suppose, some basics around confidence and well-being. So I suppose confidence and well-being, as we mentioned at the start, can get eroded away through the education system. And that would be normal for most people, but for someone with a learning difference, this may have a longer path, and this may have more difficult and let's say more challenging path for them. There's a multiple range of tools here that need to be worked on depending upon obviously where the person is coming at the moment and their level of struggle, let's say, and difficulty. But we would find that most students that we would work with would have challenges in this area, and it really is about building back up those building blocks, celebrating achievements, feedback, compliments, trying to, I suppose, integrate those daily basics for a student to help build up that element of resilience. There is a kind of a constant critic or an element of self-talk for students with an element of learning differences. And it may be completely unconscious and they may not even be aware of it. But over time, if you're getting marked down and you're getting, exam questions back, or if you're getting homework that's not completed correctly, or you're comparing to other students, it will naturally be eroded away. So it's very important that we catch that as quickly as we can, because with an element of confidence has a natural increase then in exam or study, or even just overall school improvement and performance. A little bit then from a teacher toolkit. So again, for anybody from a teacher base, just kind of a little bit of an overview there, as to some of the things that can be integrated also at school, but then very much so at home. Okay, guys, we also have a range of free booklets, and we usually put them out kind of every month or two on the website, and you can go into them directly on the website under the free PDF section, or you feel free also to send me an email if you'd like to get onto them directly. Okay, I just have a question, 2 seconds there now. Okay, guys. Yeah, so as I said, please feel free to get in touch with us if you have any queries, anything following on from today that you don't want to address at the moment. Just a little bit of an overview on some useful sites just before we wrap up. So Luminosity is the direct link here to the brain training platform. Patanos is great. There can be lots of maths-based and English-based puzzles. Typing.com. Thinking Toys have a wide variety of educational resources, both for at home and for school. And then the Big Life Journal, which is just a fabulous resource, based in the States initially. They send out free booklets and free kind of summary guides to parents and to teachers generally every week, but they also have a range of kind of resources and journals and different things that can be downloaded as well on their website. So it can be really great to use both at home and in school. So thanks a million for everybody for joining, and hope you found it all very useful. And what I'll do is I will stop the share of the slides. If anybody would like to